In this section, we're going to talk about the self-study program and how it's constructed, how it works for tax year 2020. First of all, you have an abundance of training materials at your disposal. The first one on the list here, IRS resources, is the linklearncertification.com website. We're going to look at more detail on this, but this is where you're going to go actually to get your certification, and there are links to many of these other sections. So this is a very important web page that you're going to be going back and forth from and to. So good to know this. Form 6674 is the certification test and retest. So there is a test and there is a retest. So if you fail to get 80% correct answers on the test, you have what's called a retest, where you can essentially go through the same scenarios as you did in the test, but there will be different questions than you had on the original test. So the retest is a way to give you a second chance to get your certification if you fail to get it on the first try. Publication 4491 is the training guide. This is a quite substantial document, a book I should say. If it's printed on paper, it's probably a book about 3/4 of an inch thick, maybe even an inch these days. I don't know. So there's quite a bit of information in the 4491 training guide. A lot of illustrations in there, so it's a little bit dry because it is tax law, and some trainees have had problems going through the training guide, and I must admit that there's a lot of redundancy between the training guide and what's called Link and Learn Taxes, which is part of the linklearncertification.com website. So Link Learn Taxes, we're going to talk about more, but that's really more of an interactive way to learn tax law, and probably better designed to keep your interest rather than the training guide. But if you need more information than you get from Link and Learn, the training guide is a good place to go to get more detail. Pub 17, your federal income tax for individuals. Pub 17, during the training, we don't really use Pub 17 a whole lot. Again, this is a resource to go to when you need more information than what you currently get from the training. So if you get into a situation, particularly useful at tax time, you get into a situation where the training that you had really isn't substantial enough to give you all the information that you need. You can always go back to Pub 17 and get more detailed information. Now, the Tax-Aide resources, the resources provided by the National Tax Training Committee, the NTTC. So the Tax-Aide people provide a lot of really, really nice training information and resources. Let's start with the Pub 4012. There is a Pub 4012 produced by the IRS as well, but we have taken the Pub 4012s that the IRS produces and we have enhanced it and included a lot of information that was not there under the IRS version. So we encourage you that if you're going to use the publication 4012, you'll probably have a hard copy of 4012 from the IRS, but the version that we use is online. It has a lot more information, and we recommend that over the IRS version. TaxSlayer Practice Lab, which is the online tax preparation software that we use. That is actually a resource that is provided by the IRS, but we use the Practice Lab exclusively in the training. This is the software that you're going to use to do your practice exercises. The National Tax Training Committee Workbook, NTTC Workbook, has a variety of federally focused practice exercises. So you're going to find that we're going to be dealing with Massachusetts tax law and Massachusetts tax returns later, probably starting in December. We'll be focusing on Massachusetts. But in the meantime, you have the ability to create a Massachusetts tax return in the practice exercises. But Massachusetts oftentimes needs to be adjusted for various reasons. Since you're not going to have that education until later, You can go ahead and create a mass return, but don't be concerned with whether the answer to it is correct or not. That comes later on. So the NTTC online training and videos are also very good. They're available on the volunteer portal, which you will have access to as a volunteer. Even as a trainee, you will have access to the portal and you'll have access to these training videos. I also have pointed you in some cases to these videos on specific topics. There's a tax aid scope manual that the NTTC has created. Uh, the word scope becomes very important with tax aid. There are certain things that are in scope and certain topics that are out of scope. Things that are out of scope, we refer our taxpayers to generally paid tax preparers in order to deal with issues that are out of scope for us. So we'll talk more about scope in a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more about the Volunteer Resource Guide, publication 4012. This resource guide is written specifically for the VITA TCE program that the IRS has had for years. The VITA stands for Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. The TCE stands for Tax Counseling for the Elderly. The tax aid program actually falls under the Tax Counseling for the Elderly umbrella. This manual also contains pretty much everything that you're going to need when you take the certification test, for the advanced certification test. So that's kind of your one and only go-to resource that you can use and you should use to answer the questions in the certification exam. So you probably will not find anything in that certification test that is not covered somewhere in that 4012 manual. So you should be familiar with where to find things. So you should get familiar with the manual in advance. It's the latest one is usually available in the month of October, but I would warn you that because we're going to be using tax year 2021 for training purposes, the one coming out this October or this month actually is the 2022 version. So I would stick with 2021 until probably December, at which time we're probably going to switch over to 2022 for a lot of the various resources that we have. Tax year 2022 printed version is usually available in mid-November. So people that are already signed on as tax aid counselors will have a printed version mailed to them sometime in November. I am currently sending out 2021 versions to the prospective counselors that are in this training class. So you may have already received it. You probably should have already received it from me. So you can use that for what we're studying this month, this time around, tax year 2021. TaxAide recommends using the NTT's modified version of the 4012 rather than the IRS version. Because the NTTC has done some significant modification and added a lot of information that the IRS version doesn't have, they strongly recommend using their version, which I have made available in my self-study folder. So you can get it under federal resources. And I think you'll find that a lot more useful in some situations than the IRS version. This is a view of the self-study folder that I have set up for you folks, and actually for even the counselors that we already have that need to go back and look at 2021 as a refresher. So you can see that I've set up quite a few folders here, as well as one particularly important file at the bottom, the self-study program for new students, which is something that you may already have accessible to yourself. So even though this says download, you've probably already downloaded it, so no need to do that again. So you can see that the folders here are tax aid policy and procedures for tax year 2021, the NTTC workbook answer key. So you can see that we have all of the answers for the various practice exercises in the workbook, and you can always consult those to see how your answers compare to theirs, and then after that you can track down where you went wrong and learn from that experience. The NTTC practice workbook is available here. New student self-study answers and worksheet, Massachusetts resources. We're going to look at some of these individual folders independently in the next few slides. Mass practice returns, mass answer key, and federal resources for tax year 2021, where you're going to find the 4012. In the federal resources folder, you will find these 5 files. Starts with the scope manual, the 8-page resource tool, which you should have received it in the mail along with your 4012 and your practice workbook. People that are returning counselors would already have this from last year. The training guide, the 4491, a tool that you can use to get more detail on some of the things that you've learned in Lincoln Learn. So the 4491 manual is in there. And of course, the 4012, the Bible, as we often call it, the 4012 is in there as well. And this is the modified version, the NTTC modified version, which is recommended, which is only online, by the way. So you don't have a hard copy of that. Many of the things you can look up in the IRS version, some of the simpler things, but things that get into more detail and that require more explanation, you're going to find probably better explanations and more details in the NTTC version. And then you're going to also find the test retest booklet for 2021. So you can see what the tests and the retests look like in 2021, which of course is not the test you're going to be taking. You're going to be taking the test retest for 2022 when that becomes available. But typically the IRS overwrites the old version with the new version, and the old version is unavailable at a certain point. So I wanted to make sure that you had the old version here so that you can see what it looks like. But that is not the test that you're going to be trying to pass. It's going to be a different one. This is the Massachusetts resources folder. Here you will find four files. The most important of the 4 is the Mass Manual for tax year 2021. This is essentially much like the 4012 is the Bible for the federal. This is the Bible for the Massachusetts tax return. So you're not going to have much use for this until December. And again, in January, there will be a new version for 2022 that'll be available sometime in probably early 2022. So, but it doesn't change, the Mass Manual doesn't change a whole lot from one season to the next. So you can probably use this going well into 2022. You can also see that we have some handy worksheets that when you become a counselor, you will be using these worksheets quite often when you prepare tax returns that include Massachusetts tax returns, which is most of the returns that you're going to do. And then you have the mass intake worksheet. So you can look at those things on your own, but for training purposes, the Mass Manual is probably the most important thing in here. Let's briefly look at the practice returns for Massachusetts. Even though for the first 6 weeks, you're really not going to be dealing with Massachusetts, I want you to at least be aware that this folder is out there in the self-study folder. So practice returns were developed by people at the state level, tax-aide folks, volunteers at the state level. They have developed these various levels of practice returns, and these are specific to tax year 2021. So you can see that there is a basic, an intermediate, and a comprehensive level. And there's also a README first file, which I strongly recommend that you do, because sometimes during the tax season we find that some of these problems had a little mistakes in them that needed to be fixed and got fixed and put into this README file. So before you get involved in any of these practice returns, make sure you read the README file first. Also, I want to alert you to the fact that part of the certification process for 2022 is going to be that you complete 4 intermediate level tax returns, and they're going to come from a set similar to this. It's not going to be from tax year 2021, though. It's going to be tax year 2022. So at some point, there is going to be a set that are labeled TY22. So you can get familiar with these, but these are not going to be the problems specifically that you're going to be having to complete. You're going to have to complete 4, uh, but these are not the exact ones that you're going to be doing, but they're similar. So you can look at them as an example, but don't think that the 4 that you're going to be doing are going to be from this. They're going to be from the TY22 set. Here's the folder with the NTTC workbook. And here again, there is an errata for this as well. And I suggest that you read that first before you get involved with any of the practice exercises here. Focus on federal tax. These exercises focus on federal tax law. They give you the ability to create a state return, but again, they don't focus on the anomalies that we often find in Massachusetts tax returns. So let's now talk about the NTTC self-study program, which is the crux of the training that you're going to be going through over the next several weeks. This is essentially the roadmap of all of your learning that's going to take place probably over the next couple of months. So you'll find that this program is a PDF file that you have in the self-study folder that I have set up. And you'll also be able to find this same PDF file in the volunteer portal if you go there. What I would suggest, however, is that you pay more attention to the one that I've created, because I did, as I went through this program, found that there were a few little things that needed to be fixed. And so the one that's in my folder has been fixed. And so we'll probably alleviate the issue of possibly having questions along the way. So I would suggest that you use mine. So you have step-by-step instructions in this self-study program in this PDF file for learning federal tax law and associated tax return preparation for tax year 2021. What's nice about the NTTC self-study program is that it's composed of many short, simple tax return exercises that focus on a single tax law topic at a time. So you don't have a complicated tax return where one thing possibly has influences another, and it gets more difficult to understand. So the NTTC has really kept this quite simple by just sticking with one topic at a time. So if you're studying wages, you'll have an exercise that has you input a couple of W-2s. And if you're talking about dividends, you're going to have an exercise that creates a simple tax return that only has something that has dividends and nothing else. And then eventually, when you get past these simple exercises, you'll get into the NTTC workbook, and you'll do more complicated returns. And those are in varying degrees of complexity. So you'll start with the basic, you'll move into the intermediate, etc. And those will have multiple things going on in them where one thing can influence another. But for the first few weeks, you're only going to be dealing with very, very simple tax returns. Quite a few of them, I must admit, that you're going to have to create. But you'll learn from each one of them. So it's a good experience. So what are the benefits of the self-study program that we have developed for you? By following the self-study program, you will, number one, gain a basic understanding of the tax law required so that you can effectively prepare a correct tax return. Correct is the operative word here. Practice using TaxSlayer, the software that we use to prepare and e-file tax returns. And number three, you're going to utilize various resources that we've prepared for you and tools to accurately prepare federal tax returns. Let's talk a little bit about how to use the self-study program. So the steps that you're going to follow in this methodology that has been developed is that you're first of all going to read the key learning objectives. Each exercise has key learning objectives that are going to be described at the very beginning of each exercise. Complete the Link and Learn assignment and or attend a virtual class on the topic. So this year, what we've arranged for you is that the self-study program has Link and Learn assignments built into them. We highly recommend them. They're very well done by the Internal Revenue Service. So I highly recommend them. But for some people that do better in a classroom environment, they may prefer attending one of our virtual classes using Google Meet online so that they can study the topic in that way in a classroom environment. But I strongly would recommend doing both if a person is so inclined to do Link and Learn and do the virtual class as well. So either or both. The third step here is to complete the additional learning section. And then you're going to use publication 4012, and notice that everything in blue here, these are not hot links in my PowerPoint presentation, but when you get to the self-study program, everything that's in blue is generally a hot link that you can click on and actually go to a website or to a video or whatever it happens to be. But since this was taken from the PDF file, those hot links appear here, but they are not hot. So you're going to use the publication 4012, the NTTC modified version of the volunteer resource guide, and you're going to complete the practice lab tax return using the Tax-Aide software. And as I said in the previous slide, these are going to be very simple exercises, very simple tax returns that you're going to create. You're going to record your answers on a self-study counselor progress sheet, which you're going to be able to print out from the program, from the PDF file. So if you click on that link, it'll bring up the progress sheet. Print out a copy of that so that you can write your answers on that progress sheet. Then you're going to click to find the answers at the end of each exercise. So there's a hot link that says answers. When you click on that, you're going to actually see the answers to the various exercises and compare yours to the answers and see where you went wrong, if you went wrong, or see whether you got it correct or not, and then learn from the process of making it correct. You're going to review key learning objectives to determine if there is an area that requires additional studying. So you're going to review those learning objectives that you read through at the beginning of the exercise and see if you've learned everything that was intended to be learned from those objectives. This is linklearncertification.com or VITA TCE Central. This is a pretty busy page. There's a lot going on here, but this is where you're going to go to do your certification tests eventually when you're ready to do your 2022 certification, which won't be until January. But this is where you will go. You go to linklearncertification.com, and you're going to take the advanced test, which notice I have circled in that little illustration of the books. The first one has 1 book, second one has 2 books, 3 books, etc. Well, that's indicative of which test you're going to take. So the first one is the basic test, which you do not take because it's only a subset of the advanced test, which is what you need to take. So the advanced test is number 2, and I put a little circle on, so you can just click that there in order to get to the advanced test. But first of all, you have to log in. There's a place for a username and password. If you don't already have a username and password, you need to create an account down on the left side bottom corner. Create an account, and so you can create multiple accounts, but each account has to have its own email address. So if you only have one email address, you're only going to be able to set up one account. If you have multiple email addresses, you can set up multiple accounts. But each account is tied to an email address. Then you will see in the middle instructor tools, which do not apply to you. More help getting started tutorial. You can look at those if you'd like, but the ones that are important I've circled under quick links. You can see that you can get to Link and Learn Taxes from here. You can also get to the certification test and retest. So the booklet that you're going to receive eventually in the mail, which is the publication 6744, is also available in PDF format, and you can get to it from here. So when the 2022 test and retest booklet is available, you'll be able to reach it from here. And then I went down to the practice lab where you can get to the practice lab to do your practice returns from here. And then you can also get to the reading material necessary to prepare for the volunteer standards of conduct training. So one of the tests that you will need to take is standards of conduct training, which is a very straightforward, um, common sense type test that you could probably pass it without doing any reading, but most people like to do the reading in advance, and this is where you would access that reading material. And at the bottom, the intake and interview and quality review training is also reading material that you would use to prepare for that test, which is also required of you. So those are the things that you can get to from Vita TCE Central. And I don't think you need to know any more than what I've covered. So good luck.